Okay, welcome back to another episode of Camping Can Be Fun. You're camping with the Blockheads. Blockheads being our adventure group, our adventure club. We're kind of in the deep south. We're in Alabama, and we usually camp in the spring and in the fall when the temperatures moderate, but usually we still have warm days, sometimes very hot days, cool nights. We picked that season because the bugs aren't so bad and everything. But sometimes we may spend a week out in the backcountry, and we're canoe campers, so we can bring one of these giant behemoths, this being a 58 quart Coleman 6 Day Extreme Cooler. A lot cheaper than the Yetis, my friends, and it will outperform a Yeti when properly used. And trust me, I used to own a Yeti, I sold it. I much prefer these. The primary reason, an empty Yeti the same size weighs 4 times as much as this cooler. This cooler empty weighs less than 8 pounds. A Yeti the same size empty weighs about 25 pounds. So once you load it down and you're carrying it in and out of camp and loading it in and out of canoes by yourself, that becomes quite the chore. You got to make sure you get the 6 Day Extreme Coleman Cooler, and they will survive a long time. We had one experience where we had a flood come into one of the canyons where we were camping. We had to egress out. We had to leave all of our equipment in the canyon for almost 2 weeks before the floodwater subsided enough that we could climb back down in the canyon, load up in our canoes, and safely float out of this whitewater canyon. And when we went back down there, the day that we paddled out, we stopped halfway through the trip and we ate lunch out of our coolers. Everything in it was perfectly cold. I still probably brought home 2 or 3 pounds of ice that was still in that cooler. And it was warm days, cool nights, way above any freezing temperatures. So the primary thing to remember with a cooler like this when you're packing is about 3 or 4 days prior to the trip, fill your cooler with ice. I call this sacrificial ice. That way you bring the cooler down to a chilled temperature. You're not trying to, the day of the trip, cool down the interior of this cooler. It's already pre-chilled. I'll also collect some ice. I'll put it into bags, and I'll put maybe 10, 12 pounds of ice, crushed ice, or cubed ice, what have you, whatever you buy, and I'll put it in my freezer at home, and that will chill that ice down to about 0 degrees. And I will use that as I pack my cooler. I'll also take large bottles and I'll fill them with good I like to use filtered water so that I can drink it later, like this 32 ounce Nalgene bottle. And we've been down here nearly a week, and it's still fairly solid with ice. And I have several smaller ones. As you can see, this is day 4. I have to break the ice away from this. It is so cold. I froze these in a freezer. And that allows you, just a few bottles of ice allows you lots of space for all of your good, scrumptious camp food and cool, refreshing beverages. And as I'm filling the cooler, I'm taking the bagged ice that I froze in the freezer, and I'm filling in spaces as I'm stacking the cooler. And I try to stack the cooler in a way that I'll have a little bit of food, a little bit of beverages for each day. And I kind of do a layer system, backfilling the whole way with the extremely cold crushed ice. And then as I'm stacking, I'm intermixing it with frozen bottles. In this case, I think I used 3 frozen bottles because I knew the temperatures wasn't that hot, and we were only here for 5 days. If I were going for a week, I'd probably have a little more ice and allowing a little less space for food. And on a week-long trip, I may supplement my cooler with a soft cooler that I will use for the first 2 days, and I won't even open this cooler for 2 days. And another thing I'll do sometimes is I'll seal around the lid with some duct tape, just to seal out air that might blow in, especially during transport, especially if I'm hauling it in a trailer with my canoes. Another thing that's very important, certainly while you're transporting your cooler, while you're in your canoe, you want a cam buckle strap that's a quick release. You can cinch it down tight. This cooler can fall on its side, upside down. The lid is not coming off. You're not going to lose your contents. And also, at night, in the middle of the night, if you have a raccoon or something come into camp and decide he wants something out of your cooler, he's not going to be able to defeat this. He will not get through it and will not get into your cooler. Now, if a bear comes in, that's a whole different story. But so far in my 30 some odd years of backcountry, I've never had that problem. But we have had lots of problems with raccoons and squirrels. So anyway, that'll take care of that. And then I like to put my Mylar over it just for extra protection. And I'm about to move this cooler because, as you can see, the sun is coming through and starting to touch the cooler. I'm going to move it to a nice, cool, shady spot behind my tent, and it'll be good for the day. And this is another episode of Camping Can Be Fun.